We are here today at LPC meeting 5 for the Downtown Revitalization Initiative in Kings Park High School. It is October 10th, 2024. Welcome everyone and thank you for coming out to the 5th meeting. And we will have Mr. Elkowitz read the preamble.
Thank you, Edward. Thank you for having agreed to be a member of the Kings Park Downtown Revitalization Initiative, known as the DRI, and the local planning committee, LPC or committee. As a committee member, you will develop and recommend projects, programs, and policies that your community may embrace to revitalize its downtown. If accepted, these recommendations could influence millions of dollars of public and private investment. Governor Kathy Hochul is committed to ensuring that all people involved in state programs are dedicated to the public interest. As a committee member, you must always serve and act in the public interest. To help guide your service and actions, remember DAD. DAD stands for Disclose Conflicts of Interest, Act in the Public Interest, and disqualify if necessary.
At this time, for the committee, are there any additional recusals or conflicts to declare?
I had one recusal that I needed to announce. It's the 4056 Main Street.
Okay. What is the nature of the recusal?
They do my insurance. So.
Is that?
Is it 5056?
50,
No, not 5056. It was the 4 Main Street.
4 Main Street is the restaurant that you
Right next door is there was an application for the ones that was for apartments.
You mean 826 34 44? I think.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
The owner of so for Anthony Tanzi, an additional conflict for project 12 8 30 26. Yeah, it's still in project. Okay. So that will be recorded and we'll just make note for that project when it comes up. You'll have to leave. There are a set of chairs outside for conflicts. We will be enforcing conflict of interest so if an LPC member has a conflict, you must leave the room for the discussion of the project. We are at meeting 5 of 6 for the committee meetings. We just had our community meeting number 2 on September 12th. We'll get into that in a second, and one order of business is whether additional meetings will be needed after this. Under the DRI guidance throughout the state, we typically have 6 meetings. At the 6th one is when we decide the final slate, and in terms of community meetings, there are 2 required, and it's discretionary as to whether additional meetings should be held from the local planning committee. So folks from the public were able to evaluate the projects on 3 criteria: state and local goal alignment, catalytic effect, and co-benefits, cost effectiveness, and readiness. So this is the same evaluation that the LPC has, it's just we condensed some of the categories. This is where projects kind of came out in terms of priorities. You have kind of high alignment, mid alignment, and low alignment. The top 3 projects were the Town Park, 40 Church Street, or the VFW, and the streetscape and pedestrian safety improvements. We'll also go throughout the evening feedback from both the public and the LPC per project. And I just want to remind everyone, this is based on initial evaluations. Projects may continue to improve and incorporate the public feedback. The whole purpose of the evaluation is to get feedback. So just because something scores or is kind of ranked low or mid doesn't mean that it can't be included in the end, because theoretically we want public feedback to improve these projects. And at the end, based on sponsors or public sponsor or project sponsors' incorporation of this feedback, that's where we end up with making final decisions. How best will they incorporate public and LPC feedback? That's the last month, and that's kind of what we're doing in this last month as we kind of get to the last meeting. In terms of proposals, we have I think over 21 million in requests at the moment. We need to get that down eventually to a final slate target of 12 to 16 million. And the DRI, or the state will award 9.7 to the LPC slate. For projects that don't make the final slate, the LPC may also create a pipeline projects list. These pipeline projects may also be identified as important to revitalization, but are not part of the final slate. So we also asked, in addition to the public evaluation, we asked the LPC to evaluate the projects, and that was on the previous slide we showed everyone, or sorry, 2 slides ago. That was the evaluation sheet for the LPC. It's the same kind of criteria: state local goals, project readiness, catalytic effect, co-benefits, cost effectiveness, and this is kind of how the projects were, initial evaluations in terms of alignment. The top 3 projects from the LPC were the streetscape and pedestrian safety improvements, the new town park, and the rebranding and marketing project. Again, these are initial evaluations, and projects may continue to improve before the LPC's final slate recommendations. And today we're going to discuss, how these projects can be improved. Bless you. There is also a question about whether, at this time, based on what was submitted, would that individual LPC member recommend the project but additional details needed, project has support but is not ready for the DRI, or the project is not supported. And this is kind of just a way to kind of nudge the LPC to start prioritizing projects. We have kind of, there's, I should say, for all the LPC members and for folks at home or folks here, there is a summary slide, and we'll provide all these materials online as well, so folks have it. But for the LPC members, you do have this sheet that shows a summary of both the public alignment and also the LPC recommendations. And that just kind of summarizes everything, all the feedback and all the surveys in one. So again, we need to arrive at a final slate between 12 and 16 million. And between now and the final meeting, or at the final meeting, the LPC has to decide for every project whether to recommend for DRI funding, whether to move to a small project fund. I don't think we have projects here that would move to a small project fund. Keep as a priority project, but recommend for other funding, or what we said before, a pipeline project, so meaning it's not part of the slate, but it's important to the community. Or we would remove it completely from funding consideration and do not include it in the plan. The last thing is to request more information, which obviously we can do that for every project. In terms of the recommendations, so because you need to end up at a slate of 12 to 16 million, so this is important. The projects that scored highest are not enough to fill an entire slate. If you only went with the high projects, you would only be at 10 million. So you need to get up to 12 to 16 million. We're starting to kind of assess, based on the information available today, preliminary recommendations, yes, no, should it be in the pipeline, meaning it's not going to be on the slate, but it's important to the community. And lastly, if you have a conflict, you cannot say yes, no, or pipeline, you have to recuse yourself from any evaluation. Rob will present the first set of projects.
Right, thanks, Edward. My name is Rob Yukowski. I'm a town planner and urban designer at WSP. And we'll quickly talk through the Goal 1 projects. There's 3 projects in Goal 1. The first is the street and pedestrian safety improvements sponsored by the town. Has a $4.5 million DRI request out of a total cost of $7 million for about 64% request. It has 100% and a high recommendation from the LPC. It aligns with the LPCs and as well as high alignment with the public input. The second project is the Long Island Railroad pathway to Main Street and Russell Park. It's a Town of Smithtown sponsored project requesting $500,000 at a total cost of $500,000. So 100% request. Has a 79% or high recommendation from the LPC so far, and from the alignment with the LPC is high, and from the public is mid. And the third one is New Village and Library Green with trailhead upgrades. This is sponsored in part by both the Town of Huntington and the Smithtown Library. They're requesting $3 million for a total project cost of $3 million, so again, 100% request. This has a...
Smithtown.
I'm sorry?
Town of Smithtown.
Oh, Town of Smithtown, I'm sorry about that. Well, we will note that and correct it. And this has a high, 92% LPC recommendation so far, as well as a high alignment from the LPC and a high alignment with the public input. And as we go through these, we'll have some discussion items. First is power lines. Many expressed the desire for power lines to be considered within the streetscape scope, although some commented that money should be allocated elsewhere. Project elements, positive feedback on a wide range of elements in these projects, including bike infrastructure, parking, access, and needs of seniors and disabled as it relates to redesigned sidewalks and crosswalks, offering seating options and ADA compliance, and cost effectiveness and scope. Two of the largest DRI requests are within this goal, and comments address whether or not more funding should be spread across other projects. Right. Next slide. First project is the street and pedestrian safety improvements sponsored by the town. This is to implement streetscape and pedestrian improvements along Main Street, Meadow Road West, Indian Head Road, and Church Street to improve walkability, safety for pedestrians and drivers. To note, this is in coordination in part with county efforts for Main Street. So from Dawson to Pataki, that portion would be funded by Suffolk County, while the remaining portion of Main Street from Dawson to Park would be funded by the DRI. Improvements may include power line relocation on Main Street, bulb outs, reduced curb cuts, widening sidewalks, accessible pedestrian ramps, and high visibility crosswalks. Other streetscape improvements may also include reconfigured parking lot near 7585 Main Street to provide central parking within downtown. Streetscape improvements may also include lighting, additional places to sit, street trees, planters, trash receptacles, and wayfinding signage to improve the experience of downtown visitors. So since our last LPC meeting, we've advanced the concepts for each of these 4 street segments, and we'll had meetings with New York State DOT and the county, and we'll share these on the upcoming slides. But before we go there, just wanted to give the town an opportunity to add a little more information.
To give a little bit of information as to the update for this project. Since the last time that this committee was together, the town has had an opportunity to meet with PSEG, and PSEG had the opportunity to tour the downtown. That was before the last meeting. And they've presented the town with an estimate for what the costs would be to relocate the utility lines. It would likely be largely underground, partially above ground, but behind the buildings as well. We know that there are, the county legislator is here as well, and he has reached out to try and get some information about burying completely underground. It's our understanding, based on the communications with PSEG, that the costs are roughly about $3 million to include relocating the lines. So what the town has done is we have included that in this project description and listed in order of priority the streetscape improvements that we would like to advance. So the priority being Main Street and utility lines, and then the second set of priority, which would be the cost phase 2 that you see here, which would be Meadow Road West, Indian Head, and Church Street. So just a little bit of information. You'll notice that the last time that we presented, the total cost was roughly $7 million total. The total cost of the project has gone up to approximately $10 million to accommodate the additional scope.
So the images here represent typical existing conditions and then potential proposed concepts. The intent of these is to really understand and come to decisions on what are the key elements to include for the streetscape improvements in each of these 4 street sections. So the first one is Main Street. This is the section of Main Street that's the extension, so it's wider than what's in the core of downtown. Next slide. And here the draft concept, typical conditions, really carries over the design from the downtown, the core downtown portion of Main Street. So this includes additional lighting and materials, intersections that may include accessible pedestrian ramps, high visibility crosswalks, and where applicable, strategic curb extensions. Next slide. Next, we'll look at Meadow Road West. This is looking east, again, typical condition, on-street parking in a small location, sidewalks on both sides, and power lines on the south side. Next slide. In the proposed, this potential concept includes widening the sidewalk on the north side into a 10-foot shared use path with a 5-foot buffer. This would also continue elements of the Main Street streetscape design, including lighting and the materials, including the stamped concrete pavers. At intersections, there could be high visibility crosswalks, accessible pedestrian ramps, and where appropriate, curb extensions and mid-block crossings. Church Street is next. Here's the typical conditions. This one is a little bit narrower of a right-of-way, so a little tighter conditions to work in. Sidewalks on both sides, on-street parking, and 2 travel lanes. The proposed concept, as shown here, again, continues the elements of the Main Street streetscape design, including lighting and materials. At intersections include accessible pedestrian ramps, high visibility crosswalks, and where appropriate, strategic curb extensions and mid-block crossings. In this example, we're showing on-street parking is formalized with pavement markings, and the narrow travel lanes and parking lanes promote traffic calming. This isn't changing any of the dimensions what's there today, it's just adding striping which is currently not existing. And the fourth and final one is Indian Head Road. This is the existing conditions. This is already wider with wider sidewalks, on-street parking, and 2 travel lanes in each direction in the typical condition. Changes a little bit at the intersections. The proposed conditions, again, continues the elements of Main Street streetscape design, including lighting and the materials. At intersections, there's opportunity for curb extensions at Meadow Road, as well as accessible pedestrian ramps, high visibility crosswalks, and including some potentially street trees and bike racks. And the final component of Project 1 includes an additional parking lot near the intersection of Main Street and Thompson Street that would provide additional parking in a centralized location in downtown. Those are the Project 1 components, and with that, I think we can open it up for discussion and comments from the LPC related to scope adjustment, power line relocation, and phasing sequencing.
Could I ask Allison to just explain to me again the change in price with respect to the lines? Like it went from what to what because of that?
So the request for DRI funding did not change. The town would still be requesting $4.5 million in DRI funding, but the total project cost to include the utility lines has increased from $7 million to $10 million, so it's approximately $3 million for the utilities.
So the request amount hasn't changed?
The request amount for the DRI funding has not changed. No, that is correct. But the description and the priorities have morphed. They've gone from where it was just going to be the streetscape work to being the streetscape and utility, and then some of the streetscape work for Meadow Road and Indian Head would have to be held until additional funding became available.
That was the next question.
Yes.
All right, thank you.
Also, Allison, can I ask you one question? The trees, so there wouldn't be any trees that are mixed in with the wires, like this one picture shows on Indian Head Road, right? If we do this, then everything will be buried and there'll be no trees under wire.
So it would be, it's removing the utilities on Main Street. So not the utilities on Indian Head Road, but it would be on Main Street, moving those wires either to the back or buried. And I think there's flexibility from this point to when it happens to be able to figure out exactly what's done.
And that goes to park, right?
It'd be, the quote that we got was Indian Head to Pulaski.
A quick question. On our sheet here, it says 4.5 million from DRI, 7 million total, but we're being told tonight 10 million, which leaves us with a shortage of 3. What's more likely, we'll find that 3, or something will be cut out of this project?
So that's why the town, in working with the Department of State, split it into 2 phases. The phase 1, which would be all the streetscape work on Main Street and the utility lines, and then phase 2, which would be streetscape work on Meadow Road West and Indian Head. So if the town is successful in getting if you nominate this project, and New York State agrees to fund at the full amount that's requested, which is the 4.5 million, all of phase 1 would be able to be accomplished, because the county already has committed the other 2.5 million. So that would get us to the 7. And then the phase 2 would be dependent upon additional funding, either from the town, the county, the state. We would all be looking for additional funding sources to accomplish the rest of that.
Thank you for that.
I have a question. The rendition of Main Street looks really wide, and, the change that's made on Main Street makes it appear as though there's a lot of room to get out of your car when you're parked on the road. But anybody that's parked on Main Street knows that when you park on Main Street, you're opening your door wide open into the street. So how are we getting that extra room?
No, that's a good question. So this slide here is typical conditions, so it's roughly about 60 feet, and it's the 2 blocks between Dawson and Park. So not where all the shops are, but further west. So after you get through the core of downtown, it widens up. So the part of downtown that's narrow is part of the county project.
So it's not in between Indian Head Road and Pulaski, it's after Pulaski.
It's after Pulaski.
The other question that I have is, part of the project calls for the leasing of property for parking. Do we have an idea what it's gonna cost us to lease the property? Is there a reason? I understand the reason is that we want additional parking, but, leasing property isn't owning property, so I'm wondering, is that a good expenditure of the town money for that portion of the project?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'll have to defer to the town if they're familiar with the specifics of the leasing agreements, but this would essentially consolidate some of these lots and irregular parking there into a more efficient design to accommodate additional parking.
I think what the town would be considering in this circumstance is similar to what we have in downtown Smithtown, where the town has long-term easement agreements with the properties. The cost is, if I could have our town attorney, I think it's like it's a very small amount, but it's easement agreements between multiple property owners for the town to be able to build and maintain the municipal parking.
Project 2 is the Long Island Railroad pathway to Main Street, connecting to the park. This would create a pedestrian walkway to the Long Island Railroad Station from Main Street via Russellville Park to create better connectivity for Long Island Railroad visitors between the railroad station and Main Street. And the walkway would be improved with landscaping and lighting for improved safety and aesthetics. The DRI fund request is $500,000, and the total construction cost, the preliminary amount, is also $500,000.
I do have an improvement to be made on that project, and that is that traffic tends to pass through that parking lot. I don't know how much of that parking lot is owned by the town versus the railroad itself, or do we own the entire parking lot?
I think one parcel is owned by the town and half is
Because
on the...
traffic runs from Indian Head Road to whatever that side road is on the opposite side to cut out the light, and that should have low-speed bumps in that parking lot. And honestly, in my opinion, again, it's my opinion, $500,000 to do that project, you can walk through the parking lot, put some more lighting in. I'd rather see the $500,000 go to something else.
Yeah.
I know it has a high score on it, but it's a lot of money that we could maybe spend on something else.
I'd like to point out that one of the things that is a goal of the LPC and the DRI was to create that connectivity between the train station and Main Street. And I think, personally, I think this is one of those ones that's kind of important because we need to encourage people to actually use public transportation to come to Kingsport. And to Joe's point, perhaps, instead of just walkways, if we created speed tables, it has the crosswalks that make it, extremely difficult for you to speed through that area. I think that could be an improvement. This might be second.
I agree. Right now when you get off the train, you're just kind of in no man's land. You could kind of walk over towards, Indian Head and then find your way to Main Street, or you could cut through the parking lot, which is quite dangerous. I agree, speed bumps, maybe. What's there now in terms of those islands? Are those already there, where you're creating the walkway and there's like green space?
There's some trees there, and there's a dumpster there.
There are a couple of islands, there are two musical moments,
Yeah,
there's people standing there.
Yeah, so these are all right now parking spaces.
Okay, so you create a larger green space, and it would be very clearly indicated that this is a walkway.
Yes, I'd have to meet ADA standards and use the high visibility crosswalks, striping and markings to make it clear that this is the pedestrian walkway.
I do agree though, that when you get off the train, you're kind of lost.
One more project for Goal 1. This is the new village and library green with trailhead upgrades. This is Town of Smithtown and Smithtown Library sponsored. This would convert the western portion of the municipal lot and parts of the library open space into a new village green. This new and expanded village green would include gazebo, multifunctional outdoor learning discovery area, a new playground, community garden, band stage, and seating to facilitate community gatherings. Additionally, the town would improve pedestrian and bicycle connections to the Kings Park hike and bike trailhead along the newly installed village green, allowing visitors better access to nearby state parks and the Long Island Greenbelt Trail. And the trailhead would feature improved landscaping and new signage. This has a request for $3 million and a preliminary construction cost of $3 million. So with that, we'll open it up for any discussion or comments.
I love this one, because I think this project brings most of the entire community. This is something everyone in our community, from the little ones to the older ones, when we do our veterans things, are gonna be able to use. It's so unsafe what we do now. We do it right on the corner. There's always an overflow into 25A. There's always have the police there. I think this is so great for community residents that I just have to say, I think this is the best one.
Yeah.
I agree with Linda, this is my single favorite project in the list. I think it brings a lot to the community and the Kings Park.
A lot happens in that corner. These holidays that are there, the tree aligned, menorah, anything that gets celebrated is always focused in that area. There's concerts in that area.
And look, there's gonna be redevelopment, and some people, and it's a scale. Some people hate it, some people love it, and there's a million people in between. I think it's so important for us to give the community something, that really will benefit them and really tighten up our community tighter than it already is. So I think this is really a no-brainer that has to go forward. Or, if people start seeing things that benefit them and that they like and that are done well, I think they'll be more open to other things down the road.
I believe this project had an agreement with the library district about moving the playground and closing up that drive-through. Can the town is that agreement in place already, or does that still need to happen?
Well, the project hasn't been awarded, so
Yeah.
no, there's no agreement. So, but we've taken it even a step further. Legislator Prada and I met with the church and talked about possibly even doing a land swap because the library has this enormous parking lot with the eastern portion heavily underutilized, whereas they have an athletic field that kind of like juts out into the library property. If we did a land swap, there was possibility there where you could maintain the parking connection. So, you know, we're open to a couple ideas. This is just a concept drawing that was put together quickly.
Goal 2. So we'll go through these projects, these next 5 projects, and we've summarized the comments from the public here. And a lot of these comments were, I think, also similar to the LPC. For these Goal 2 projects, there were a lot of comments about awarding to private entities and private leverage, or queries about the eligibility of private entity matching. I mean, for the DRI, we don't, you know, the DRI funds are not meant for solely town projects, and that's why we have an open call for projects and for, you know, private owners and business owners and tenants to propose projects that could also be transformational or catalytic to a community. Improving the local economy and foot traffic, you know, people feel, you know, it was really great. In these projects, these are mainly like restaurants or projects that already have ground floor retail, and there was a lot of positive feedback about improving foot traffic and supporting the local economy through food and beverage. But there were also concerns about tenanting, security, maintenance, and accessibility. I think in the main part where new units or improvements are made to certain projects, you know, across the board, or where new retail or office is being created, folks were concerned about vacancy, and rightly so. I think for all project sponsors who are proposing, you know, renovations of ground floor retail or new commercial space, they have to involve a broker. They have to declare kind of, you know, potential tenants or letters of interest from potential tenants. So that will kind of be included in kind of final updates as to where these projects stand with tenanting.
So when these private entities request their project to be funded, are they ever required to provide financial statements to show like the amount of cash on hand to see like, okay, this entity may or may not need the funds and it may be well deserved to go to someone else?
So for projects that are requesting over, or if the project cost is over $500,000, they have to submit detailed financials for the project. If it is under $500,000, there's no request, or there's no requirement from the state, but it is, you know, still incumbent upon this committee, if you know, you will assess even those projects as to whether it is a reasonable request, or, you know, if the feedback is, can this project be done with higher matching grant, that's feedback that we would provide back to the sponsor. And, you know, they have basically, because between now and the final meeting, an updated cost estimate, one more final update on the cost estimate, and based on what that cost estimate is, you know, will they change or improve their matching grant? And so at LPC 6, you'll see the final, you know, offer, or like final kind of, you know, I think in terms of their project assessment, you know, what they can do. But we are always reviewing with the project sponsors. We look at the project financials to see, you know, can they...
That was a very good question, and I think Edward answered it pretty well. And from the state side, very early on in the process, we provide the consultants with tools to help them do the vetting. So what's really important to the state is project readiness. And one way to determine project readiness is to, you know, vet the finances. So by the time we go into contract with these different entities, the state can, you know, draw up a contract, execute the contract, and start working with these project sponsors to actually implement the projects, if that helps.
So the first project from Goal 2 is for Main Street renovation. Sponsor is Kings Park Realty Holding LLC. The project sponsor was notified about the public comments and LPC comments, and to address the concern about the public benefits, he's considering to change the scope slightly, remove interior renovations to the basement and the apartments, and he's considering to add sidewalk improvements and improvements to exteriors and outdoor space. The fund request remains the same, it's $1 million. Does the LPC have any suggestions for improvement of this project or any questions?
So just to recap, I think a lot of comments were received about the interiors. So the scope around the basement has been removed, and so the interiors are solely for the restaurant now. And it's primarily exterior renovations for the patio and the facade.
That'll be part of that street.
No, I think they mean the backside, and they would contribute as well.
I think also in the front,
At the
because
front.
that's the private sponsors.
It's
Front is
there,
really
yeah.
back.
The front is really, yeah, it's the front, the back. Well, they would improve the part facing the train parking. Are there any questions about this? I think, there was comments about it being a very high a high request, but they are not going to, I think they're going to stay. We will review the costing with them, so it may change, but otherwise I think this fund request is staying the same.
Well, I had a
Yes.
question. It kind of is in general to most of these. Is it possible for the LPC to because we want to encourage private investment. So is there a way that we could reduce what the DRI would fund? So if we said, okay, instead of $1 million, we're willing to give 200,000, or the LPC recommends 200,000 to hopefully encourage some of these things to actually happen, but not use a significant portion of the funding.
So the LPC can specifically tell a project sponsor how much to request, right? But you can, for instance, just as you did, you told the consultant, hey, go back and speak to the project sponsor to see if they can rework their request, if that makes sense.
But I guess my question is, even though they're asking that, can the LPC say, well, we're not going to give $1 million, but we will give 200,000? And I'm not saying that's the number, I'm just saying,
Right,
for example.
we're saying the same thing, but officially what, the way it would go would be that you would tell the consultant to go back to the project sponsor and see if they can potentially reduce that amount, not necessarily setting a specific amount for them to request, right?
I think the general feedback is from the committee is that it's a high ask, and we'll probably have to work with the sponsor to see how it can be reduced. And
Quick question about the sponsor. The person who came and spoke to us was the tenant.
Yes.
This says Kings Park Realty Holding. Has the sponsor changed to now the building owner?
No, it's the building owner, yes, and
It's now the building owner.
he's incorporating the upgrades to the restaurant as well.
Well, it's the building owner in partnership with the restaurant.
And that's a change, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
Even if if it is a tenant, they have to get signatory, they have, the owner still has to be a signatory to it. So,
Understood.
but now
The reason I asked is because there's stuff in here like siding, and that would be the building, not the occupancy.
Now,
So-
so that it's now that the owner has officially signed on to this, and so it is in partnership with the restaurant. Yeah.
Because the original ask was a couple $100,000.
Yeah. So now that's why.
Now the renovations are on the whole building, so the ask has increased. Okay, we can move to the next project, and I think there is an LPC member who has to recuse themselves.
So Joanne has to leave, and I do want to just clarify that Caitlin had to leave for the first project because Caitlin had a conflict on the streetscape improvement. So Joanne is outside, and so we can continue.
The comments on this project were also concerning the public benefit and also what the tenanting plan was. The project sponsor is working with a broker, and also they also provided the costs for retail spaces, which will be around $2.2 per square foot, with a 3% increase each year.
She's got a for rent sign, she doesn't rent it.
And the plans for this project are pretty developed. The sponsor already has the drawings and the approvals on those drawings. Are there any other questions or comments about how this project can be improved?
The approvals from who?
The approvals from the town on the design.
Any ways that this project can be improved, or any questions about, other information you'd still like to see at this point?
I have a question of parking for this project. That's a very tiny lot in front, and there doesn't seem to be parking easy to get to, like even if you use the parking lot behind it, municipal. It's kind of a walk down that road. So parking to me is just, should be addressed more on this one.
Well, but the building's already there, so the parking, to me, doesn't make it, I'd like to see that parking lot change, because the parking lot with that high wall on it is kind of tough. I think that could be improved, but the storefronts are already there. If they filled up with tenants, we'd still have a parking problem. So I'd rather see the town be getting the revenue from the taxes, from all that. I think we should try to support this project. I know that one of the big things with any of these projects is that why should we help the storefront owners and the owners of the buildings and all this? We're trying to improve the look of the town, because that's what's going to attract people to our town. So I don't mind spending a few bucks out of our DRI fund to improve the look of the town on a general basis. So that when you're driving through, it doesn't look like it's an upstate town. Sorry if anybody lives upstate. I'd like to see it look like what downtown Smithtown is starting to look like, right?
Yeah, my comment wasn't to say I wasn't. I just think parking is a question now. That's all.
I was addressing that more broadly
Yeah.
for some of these other projects.
Because most of those things have been vacant for a long time, so I don't know how.
Yes, I think the project sponsor is working with a broker now to make sure that the renovated spaces will have tenants. And they also mentioned that in the next phase of renovations, they will also upgrade the parking lots in the front.
I think with in terms of parking capacity, I think that's also what the town's streetscape project is meant to address, with additional parking with the assemblage, so that kind of stores that are further down on Main Street would be able to benefit from parking closer to those shops and storefronts.
Okay, we can move to the next project. This is 74 Main Street, Zeros renovations. The scope hasn't really changed, and the request also remains 105,000. Are there any, this project is, I think, scoring, it was scoring high with the LPC and had a medium alignment with the public. So does the LPC have any comments or feedback how this project can be improved?
I just have a question as to where the garage doors facade is going to be. Is that in the front?
In the front, and I think it will be the outdoor seating will be part of it. So imagine the garage doors will open, and then you'll have seating inside and outside.
When they say garage doors, if you go to, right, it's basically so that, or,
Rob Keys.
it's just opening up the windows and that, but it's wide doors so that you can engage outside with inside.
It's probably only one row of seating, but
Rubos has it in Greenwich, and it's great.
And the outdoor patio would also be included?
The patio is also in the front, but it's probably just one row of seating, and those garage doors are also for that, so that it's like outside and inside will probably be open in summer. Are there any improvement suggestions on this project?
Does it have to just garage doors, could they consider like maybe windows, big tall windows or something like that, or door, glass doors or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's also part of what that garage doors, it will probably be also glass that will just go all the way up. Yeah. The next project is 83 Pulaski Celtic Crossing renovations. The updates on this project are that the project sponsor increased the match to 30%, and they have also removed the interior renovations to reduce the costs, and they were also addressing the question about the sewer timing, and they're installing an alternative sewer system until they will have an opportunity to connect to the sewers. Any questions or suggestions for improvements for this project?
The next project is 95 Pulaski, that's Mi Pueblo. There haven't been any updates to the scope for this project, but the project sponsor is requesting $128,000, which is 75% of the total costs. The majority of comments that we heard were about the timeline with sewers. This project is not able to construct any alternative alternative situations like the previous project. So their project is contingent upon sewers, which I think the most recent timeline is about 3 years. And are there any comments about how this project could be improved?
Okay, so goal 3, which we have a couple projects in the road town projects. The comments about these projects, general comments were about aesthetics and form, questions about whether there would be consistent guidelines for facades and design. So if the town's master plan is adopted, there are downtown design guidelines that any small project grant or any project would have to abide by. Small project grant eligibility, again, similar questions about eligible expenses, whether the match should be increased. We'll go into that because this committee makes recommendations on the small project grant parameters. And because there was the project on rebranding and marketing and signage, a lot of comments about history and preservation and balancing, making sure that any marketing or new branding is balancing preservation of historical roots with supporting the business and the town economy. Okay, project 9. I think I just went over the comments, but are there any comments about the town's rebranding and marketing project? Sorry, Tony, I think you have to technically lead. I think because there is mention of the chamber in this project. Yeah. You have to lead. So,
I take milk in my coffee if you're going somewhere.
I think that was, yeah, it's just Tony. Okay, so any comments on how this project might be improved? This was a high priority project across the board, but is there any way that this could be improved or anything you would like to see in this project? As part of this, typically how this project works is that there's additional community engagement with regards to, the type of signage or the type of materials. Yeah, so it wouldn't, yeah, that would be as part of the scope, what the $400,000 would be spent on. Okay, next we have to discuss the small project grant program. And I think this is the one that has the most conflicts. So, the most conflicts, and recusals, I should say. So, Susan, Dr. Egan, Joanne, and Kristen have to leave. The museum, yes, submitted.
Love that.
So whoever's left. Actually, let's go to the next slide. So we do have to decide to, like, what guidelines, and we could also finalize this at the next meeting, but just generally, for LPC discussion, these are the primary, like, parameters. Should design guidelines be required? Increases in the match beyond 25%, it's set at 25% by default, because these are smaller, you know, it's a small project grant. Typically, you don't change it, but, you know, there might be appetite from this committee to do so. Increasing the match will at least result in, you know, more funds being spread around, but also mindful of the fact that these are small businesses who are requesting. Regulatory clawback term for individual small projects. I think, you know, there is always a concern that if you do these, you know, improvements, or the owner does improvements, they're gonna kick out the tenant. So usually we do have regulatory clawbacks, or, you know, preventing someone from tearing down, or, you know, doing these improvements and then tearing down the building. We cannot limit residential applications completely, but we can put limitations on the types of residential that is funded. And other factors, one comment that came up from the committee was making proximity to Main Street or on Main Street a criteria or a recommendation as part of the grant program. You can't limit it to Main Street. Anyone in the DRI can apply, but proximity to Main Street can be one criteria.
That's something we'd like to see, a clawback provision.
Yes.
Should we ask enough for the amount of time, or just say for general, you know?
Yes. Is there amount of, what is the states on the large project, 5 years?
5 years, I believe.
So the 5 years is typical?
10 is too high.
Yeah.
5 is,
5 years.
Okay.
Is that an agreement?
Well, 5 years from what point? When they get the
Completion.
completion?
Yeah, these projects are generally completed pretty regularly. Like, obviously, there has to be a period of time where, you know, the contract is drawn up. But then after that, you know, typically projects are, you know, awarded and evaluated within a few months. And then the actual construction period usually takes within a year. Yeah.
So just as a blanket policy throughout the state, we don't limit to, you know, we don't prevent residential from applying. But that said, this committee can recommend, you know, if it is residential, that mixed use might be prioritized or preferable.
Yeah, I would say mixed use prior, and also on visible Main Street, like on where you can see the building from Main Street. This one you cannot.
Mixed use or mixed use and or commercial is preferable.
Preferable and its location.
yeah.
It's gotta be there's gotta be some sort of proximity to.
Proximity to Main Street. So
When the towns make these decisions, are
these are
they're the ones gonna be
well,
prioritized when
yes.
it
So
comes in front of them, right?
well, the town. So the way this project works is that the town would have to assemble a committee to finalize the criteria. But these are the early criteria that the DRI requested the LPC set.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of the nature there, you cannot limit interior completely, but what we can say is that, you know, a preference towards exteriors, right? The committee did not close the application window for this because it's rolling applications, and so we did receive an additional request from 7 Main Street and 12 Indian Head Road, 2 Pulaski, 112 Main Street are also interested in the program, so they may submit letters. And we are working with the sponsors to get to a final proposal on all their costing. Let's go to the first project, redevelop South Municipal Lot into mixed use and open space. I think there were a lot of questions about, you know, the timing and uncertainty about the overall development plans. I think that's really what this project is, though. It's like, it is a proposal to develop or to seek a developer and develop the municipal lot. So yes, it's not clear that, you know, what exactly would be developed, but that would be what this process would fund. You know, engagement with the community about what could be built on this lot, and the funding is also going towards the provision of, you know, the connection and community facility that would be required as part of any development.
I think this is a lot of money for what the town said they could make as a a condition of sale if they do ever sell this piece of property. This is double the cost of the walkway to Russ Sabat Park that we talked about earlier. And it looks to me like it's less intricate than that project, yet that one is half the price. So this one, I don't think, I've been here a while, I've never seen anybody use that staircase up and over the tracks. And the majority of our trains pull in on the northbound platform. Very rarely does an eastbound train pull in on the eastbound platform. It usually pulls on the other side, putting people directly into the main parking lot. So I just see this as a very expensive use for something that's not very needed.
You know, what would you want to see, or what would it need to improve?
Details.
Yeah,
You have to
okay.
say what you
It's
need.
not really on the main street, down the downtown like that piece.
That's okay with me, this is, what is it gonna be?
Yeah. So, you know, maybe if the town would provide, you know, additional parameters about, you know, what could possibly, I mean, I'm not saying that they will, but that's kind of the feedback I think we're hearing.
Okay, we'll go to the next project, 2634 Main Street.
There have been scope updates to this project. The project sponsor is proposing the demolition of 26 to 34 Main Street and construction of a new 2.5-story building with retail and office spaces on the ground floor and 1-bedroom apartment, 15 one-bedroom apartments on the second and third floor. The costing has also changed because of that, and the request is now 22% of the total cost, but the amount remains the same, $1.5 million.
So I don't think the original plan had retail space on the ground floor.
Currently, there are offices and retail on the ground floor, and this is the previous round that you saw, the sponsor was proposing a new building behind the existing structure on 26 to 34, and now the proposed project is the demolition of the existing buildings and having a new construction instead.
And is this drawing accurate, where there would be, this is the drawing that we see, is that the back of it or the front of it?
They have to update the drawing.
Is it 3 stories?
So I wouldn't refer to this drawing for any orientation other than this is the style. You know, we don't have an updated drawing yet, but we will circulate that for LPC 6.
How many buildings would he be demolishing on our Main Street?
So it's 26 Main Street, 26 to 34, yes.
26,
Does that go up to the current
Yeah, but
house?
26 and 28 is one building.
is it?
Yes.
Okay, so then 30, 32, 34.
Apartment building, then it's the first floor is obvious, the second floor is, they have some
So one
access to
tenant
that,
and another
other,
tenant, like a
Yeah.
single.
yeah, like a
people
small
walk.
bedroom up there, but not another full floor.
Yeah, I think we can clarify that it's basically the half floor, but it's, yeah, it's just, that's how it is.
Because it's like, it would be 15 one-bedroom apartments on the second and third floor.
It's basically 3 apartments per, they're basically replacing what's there,
We have no idea.
and then.
No, there's 6 apartments there.
Well, no, they're.
The
Elena, you
net
have the
gains,
next question.
Can I ask?
Yeah, that's the next question, yeah.
They're more than double on the existing.
Elena, can you
there
kind of
is
clarify?
existing, the total on that block is 6 residential units, and now there will be 15, so the net gain is 9, basically.
So maybe a little more clarification
Yes.
on how big this building is.
I think you will have updated drawings for the last meeting, and hopefully in the interim, we can just provide updates as they come by. Next project?
The next project is project 13. This is 1 Village Plaza and 12 Renwick. There has been an updated match. They've lowered the DRI ask. So they're asking for 38% of the project cost, which is a little over $1 million. The project sponsor is considering separating these two projects. So one project would be for the One Village Plaza building and the second project would be for the 12 Renwick building. But would like to ask for the LPC's feedback on that, whether or not the projects would be more likely to be recommended individually, or are they more catalytic as one project together?
Individually.
Yeah, individually.
Individually, I think would be much better.
So we will separate these two projects. Probably the One Village will fall under the goal 2, and then you'll have the 12 Renwick under this goal.
Or any other suggestions for how the project can be improved?
I want to know a little bit more about the apartments. It just says 6 apartments.
There's 4 one-bedroom apartments and 2 two-bedroom apartments on the second floor.
We'll get to it generally, but I think they are renting. I mean, and we did ask for rents from all these projects. Nobody is renting at low income, but all the projects are relatively in a moderate income band. We can get to that in the end, but that's more for discussion at LPC 6.
The next project is 5763 Main Street. This project, there haven't been scope updates as of yet. One of the main pieces of feedback that were received from both the public and the LPC was that the ask was quite high. It's $2,034,000 or 75% of the total project cost. When asking the project sponsor about this, they considered lowering the project or lowering the construction to 1 story instead of 2 stories, but also wanted to ask the LPC if you believe that the project is still catalytic as a 1-story, or would it be more catalytic as a 2-story?
2-story.
2-story, yeah.
I think 2-story.
Are there any other suggestions or questions about this project?
The ask is very high.
Well, I think that's the question. It's like,
Not only is the ask very high, but they wrote right in here that it was lost to fire. So, where's the insurance money? If they didn't insure it, then why are we paying for it now?
I'd like to mimic what was said before, that same thing. If we want to encourage them to invest in the building, perhaps there's a number that's just lower than that. We encourage them, obviously use their own funding for the majority, but if we could find a number that would be suitable, that we could say as an LPC, this is the amount.
and I think the question to Joe's point is, yes, they will be willing to, request less, but then they would only build 1 floor. So between the two, I think the committee is still saying they would like to see a 2-story proposal with just less of a request, right? Next project, 152 Main Street. Oh, goodbye.
This project is 152 Main Street. There have not been updates to the scope as of yet. Are there any suggestions from the LPC as to how this project could be improved? They're requesting $989,000, which is 75% of the total project cost.
How can it be improved? I think, again, the feedback is, can they do anything to reduce the grant request?
We don't mind improving the streets and the look of the town.
The facade is what we're looking
Right,
to improve.
but we're not making any money on the apartments once they're there, other than maybe some additional income for the town or whatever, but the owner is, having income come in as a result of that, so they should be willing to put more up. Knowing that, they're gonna eventually be making money, that's what an investment is all
Yeah,
about.
but the only thing I want to say about, that's not a hard and fast rule that apartments aren't really benefiting the town, because that's what mixed use is all about, right? You want the retail on the bottom, and then you want to have people that are in the town that are going to shop at that retail.
Agreed.
And spend time in our downtown. So there is some degree of public benefit
Yep.
having these apartments.
Right on Main Street.
on Main Street. I agree, I think 75% is too high. I agree with that.
Once they get, again, once they get.
16, 174 Main Street, and Susan has to leave, and Tony can return.
174 Main Street, no scope updates, but the project sponsor has taken the feedback and increased the matching. They're now requesting only 55% of the total costs, which is 470,000. And they have also, the way that they're addressing the question about the public benefit is they will upgrade the sidewalks and also add additional 18 parking spots. And this project also included an open patio. Are there any questions or any suggestions to how this project can be improved? Yes, there is a restaurant planned on the ground floor.
And this is in the scope, right, of
The restaurant? Yes.
They have provided letters of interest from potential tenants.
I'm not sure what type of food they would serve, but it would be a restaurant. I think they have several interests, so I don't think it's a final decision yet what kind of restaurants they will have, but that's what's planned on the ground floor, and there will be also 2 apartments on the second floor.
40 Church Street, the VFW renovations.
This project is proposed by the Kings Park VFW. A slight scope or update is that they've added an awning to the front of the building. So that has slightly increased their DRI request to $637,000, which is 81% of costs. Are there any questions about this project or suggestions about how it could be improved?
We want everybody to match more money.
This did go from 100% to 81%. They did track down additional funding for their project. So they are not required to, nonprofits are not required to have any matching funds. So I think we'll get them to detail the public use, and same with the next project, the American Legion renovations. Oh yes, you have to leave, sorry.
The American Legion also addressed the feedback about the public benefit. They provided their public use hours, and the suggested improvements would increase the public usage and community fundraising events by over 50%. And they're also adding a permanent electric generator that would be installed in the building so that it can become a community disaster relief site for heating, cooling, and during extreme weather, and also prolonged power outages. They're requesting 100% of the total cost, which is over $400,000.
Both this and the prior one really do bring a lot of community benefit. So,
This parking lot is the parking lot next to the corner of the property, right?
Yes.
So they're kind of.
They are also contributing to parking spaces to the town project for electric vehicle chargers.
The last project is 125 Meadow Road. This is the Petro site redevelopment. This project has some scope updates. They have, previously it's still 2 buildings. Previously both had retail on the ground floor. They have updated so that only one building, the more eastern building of the 2, would have retail on the ground floor. The western building would have apartments. So now there are 40 apartment units and 6 retail units for a total of 7,000 square feet across the retail units. We are working with them to address the public benefit question. However, they're considering some green space on the site, and the reduction in retail space would allow them to use more of the space that was previously allotted for parking to become some of that green space on the site. Are there any questions or comments about this project?
we have so many other good projects that are really helping Main Street, and and even if we don't get to all the little ones that want the apartments above them and stuff, all our apartment numbers shouldn't be eaten up with one giant facility, right? Because we have a limited amount that we're gonna allow down in Main Street. So all I have to say is no.
That's not me.
It's not made, I'd like to see that entire chunk of money go to the
So
downtown.
I think that's a no-brainer, no. That's
So, I know this is, like, this was the lowest scoring project. And so, you know, the point of this meeting is really to give feedback back to
so
all
it
the
has to be
sponsors.
positive.
So what would it take to improve this project? And, you know, I think these are fair comments already,
Do it
but
someplace else.
I agree.
I did just want to summarize, you know, because we do define public benefit in terms of, you know, what kind of housing is being introduced. This is just the rent ranges from the mixed-use projects and kind of what kind of affordability levels we would be talking about based on what they are proposing at this point. These may change based on, you know, because if we change the finance, or if we review the finance with these projects, you know, they might be able to offer low, or maybe they need to, you know, accommodate higher rents. But generally, based on the finances and proposals of the project sponsors at this time, this is what the rent ranges are. They are what's called moderate range, which is roughly approximating the median income of the area. So not low and not high income, it's basically middle or moderate income. And these are just, the rent ranges based on what kind of, or how many housing units and proportionate to what costs they are all requesting. So that brings us to the end, and just next steps, we are finalizing cost estimation and grant requests with sponsors. We'll continue to develop the project profiles, and we'll share updates with LPC members. And, you know, we will take continued feedback and discussion. And for this worksheet, can folks line up and we will take public comment for folks.
If you can come up here, we can, to the microphone.
Hi, can you hear me all right? Yes. Couple of questions, and I don't mean to be facetious, and I've been on committees and I appreciate everything everybody's done. But if you just walked in there for the first time tonight, there's an awful lot of confusion and some craziness as well. I was led to understand that projects had to be submitted by a certain date. You can take a project now and split it in half and start over again. You can vote on something that was $1 and now it's $2. I mean, everything that was supposed to be down and right changes, and now we're all guessing. Imagine if I went to Tony and said, Tony, I want to put a pool in my house. Well, where do you want to put it? Well, I don't know, maybe near the fence, maybe near the garage. How tall do you want to make that addition? I don't know, a story, 2 stories, maybe it'll have a porch. I have never seen such a relaxed concept. We do more for a yard, for a dog, than we do to build houses in the middle of Kings Park. I have a friend of mine who has a house on 25A. I should tell him to come around now, since apparently you can still come. Tear his little crummy house down, put an apartment on top, and well, you guys will pay for it. We have a piece of property in Kings Park that was the post office that was caught in a fire, burned to the ground. The town had to tear it down, and now this guy wants money? I have never seen something so crazy in my life. This is a runaway train, and New York State should be apologizing to us for this. How can you rush such a major amount of money? Did anybody ever think possibly we should open up that Sabbath Park and let traffic relieve itself into that parking lot rather than queue up at the traffic light? Has anybody written down that there's no bathroom in the plan for the park? This is crazy. You would ask more of Vincent DeMarco at a zoning meeting than you're doing tonight. I think it's disgraceful, and I think the runaway train has to stop. If you think it has to all be done by a certain date, you're wasting our money. That's my personal opinion. Nothing personal, but as a group, this is crazy. Thank you.
Hey, how you doing? I do approve of a lot of the stuff that's going on in the plan, but what I'm big master plan of the town of Smithtown, I'm more concerned with the overall zoning and what's allowed in the overall zoning that's not being mentioned here. Now, in the overall zoning, they're allowing up to 262 apartments with 1,006 people. I don't know if anybody knows that, but anything I have on this list here, I have a bibliography for all the information I got. That's just a little part of it. The other part of it is how the zoning change down in the light industrial area is circumventing business. I mean, it's subverting business from the town and also allowing a path of circumnavigation around the town. The light industrial area over off of, I think it's Old Northport Road, and around up towards Town Line Road, up towards Pulaski, and all the way around Lawrence has now been changed to a light industrial and small business, small commercial business, even though it's not shown on the town map. That's how you squeezed in the new Starbucks on the corner there. Now, we could have a 7-Eleven, we could have any other small business in that entire, and it also goes all the way down to the boat. In that whole area, you could circumnavigate the town and set up all small business in there if you want to. And some of the zoning in the master plan, where I get the 1,006 people from, is also all about Dan's Key Food. And all the way down to the Jetswali Yard area, where they're thinking about getting rid of a 71-acre farm in a time when they have farmland preservation, and it'll be the biggest farm that has been, the biggest farm in the last 3 years that they could give a grant to save, so we don't have all the 363 possible townhouses in there, or whatever that number is. And to change that zoning to double the amount of people in there, that'll also affect the schools, and deer, and turkey, or anything following around that can go out on Indian Head Road. If anybody wants to get with me, I have 3 pages of information, all with bibliography and more coming about what's actually going down here.
I believe we do need another community meeting, and the community needs to be in on this. I agree with you. So, does everybody want another meeting? Or?
Yes.
I understand the planning committee may not want it, but I think as the community, we should have some sort of say, and I think we should have another meeting, so I would appreciate it if we could have one comment.
I don't necessarily agree that there needs to be another community meeting. I think that the people on the committee, I think, are a good representation of the people in the community. And we have to give them the opportunity to make the right decision based on the input that we've already given. There are certain things that I think should be a priority. First of all, I don't think that this grant should be subsidizing the majority of what it's going to cost for these private development projects. I think that should be absolutely out the window. And I think most of the people on the committee agree with that. So I don't think they're going to allow the majority of these private development projects to be funded by this grant, and nor should they. There should be a limit, whether it's 10% or 15% or 25%, that's up to the committee to decide, and let them pick the best projects that they think would be appropriate to improve our downtown. The focus, and I think you guys are headed in that direction as well, the priority should be to improve the visiting experience in downtown Kings Park. And that includes, that includes the park, although I think the park is in the wrong location. I think the park should be moved closer to the hike and bike trail, but that's a discussion for another day. Certainly the aesthetics, burying the power lines, improving the sidewalks, improving safety, adding turning lanes on our major intersections, especially on Main Street heading east at Indian Head Road, because that backs up traffic all the time because people can't turn left and the traffic backs up towards the west. Those are the things that should be the priority. Whatever, this money should be used to make Kings Park a nicer and a more, excuse me? Aesthetically, but a more enjoyable experience. That's what the money should be used for, and I think you guys are headed in that direction, and I have confidence that's where you'll bring us. Thanks, Mike.
I guess I'm finding it very difficult that there's such a great disparity in what some businesses ask for and what others are asking for. So, you know, I could have, if I owned a business, I could just throw out a number and ask for $2 million, and another business is only asking for $100,000. So I find that hard. I thought there should be more of an equal dispersion of the money to the businesses rather than one asking for so much. I find that hard. And also there's other businesses like Sprouts, who she invested a ton of money already on her own, and she has already revitalized her spot. So I think she should be entitled to some additional money. Whereas there's other people on this board that haven't done anything in 60 years, they even mentioned that, and now they're gonna get all of this money. And I find that very upsetting and unnerving that some people will get so much more than others that have never put a dime into this town. And other people have really helped, and they should get the money. Or different types of money, or how is it dispersed? It's just random? So I could come out here and ask for $3 million, and it's just a random? I just don't understand that. I agree with that guy, Mike, who said everyone should get like a certain percentage of their project, but why is, you know, I don't know. I just find it just so random. And this gentleman brought up an excellent point about there's nobody even put in a bathroom, like there's no consideration for any public, like that's bizarre to me, so.
Well, maybe they'll think about it.
Yeah, I'd like to know like where these numbers came from. I don't know, is it just random? And there's also a lot of businesses that didn't ask for money. So why did they not know about this? I know there's plenty of businesses that are on here that didn't ask for $1. So why is that fair?
Well, they could have.
But they didn't know, maybe.
No, we walked up and down Main Street, knocked on every door.
They knew.
Okay.
Yeah, we did purposefully for that, because
Okay.
people weren't stepping forward, and some people said, no, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you.
We can make them.
Okay.
They gave about a month to have plans and stuff.
Oh, only a month? I don't know, I just find that just, I don't know, disparaging.
And I just see, there's a lot of places that are for rent. They've been for rent, they've been for rent, they've been for rent, they haven't been rented out. And now, like, what makes you think they're gonna rent it out now? You know, I just
think there has to be more guidelines, just more, I don't know, I guess it's frustrating. And I agree that maybe some of this money had to go to the facades of these buildings because they're falling apart. But I also feel like they should be maintained properly. Is there any guidelines on who's going to maintain these properties? And I've had this discussion with people in the town. There was this beautification project on Indian Head Road with all the bricks. There's weeds coming out of that. The trees are growing into the wires. Nobody maintains it. I call the town, they say they don't do it. Suffolk County does it. Suffolk County says the town cleans it. So guess what? It doesn't get cleaned. It doesn't get maintained. So who's going to maintain the front of the buildings that somebody didn't maintain it for 60 years, she said? And now all of a sudden you're gonna get money? And what makes me think that you're going to maintain it? I don't know that. So is there any guidelines for that, for the future? And that's what's upsetting, you know?
Hi. My question is, we're doing a lot of redevelopment proposed for the Main Street, which is good, but we've got vacant buildings and facilities for over 20 years, and I think putting a little lipstick on them is not going to bring people back to brick and mortar in some of these places. Additionally, I see a disparity in the rent that people stated is going to come in for some of these rental apartments. If we've got one development going in at $4 a square foot, how are we accepting $1 a square foot as rational? And it's within a half mile of each other and not next to the tracks. I think some people didn't do their homework with what they've submitted in part of their requests.
Thanks. So yeah, just to like piggyback off of what you said and what you brought up too, it's just, you know, all of, you know, like the money, it does seem very unorganized. You know, exactly what you said, you know, is there gonna be a deck, is there not gonna be a deck? And what you said about the maintenance of everything, where are we getting these estimates from? Are these contractors giving us the estimates? And if they are, shouldn't they be here? And then, should we get insurances about keeping up the maintenance? How do we know who these contractors are? Are they trustworthy? Are there any insurances for that?
We're raising taxes to hire people to come around and making sure people spend their money properly? We're not.
We'll try to address, I think, some of these comments just generally. So if you, as I said, if you are introducing, you know, new commercial space, they have to provide letters of intent from interested tenants or provide, you know, sort of their brokerage plan. In, I think, a few of these cases, some of these letters of intent have been submitted, so we will share that with committee and public information, or indicate, I think, when this new evaluation was released, which ones have submitted letters of intent from interested tenants. The other part of it is, you know, cost estimations are twofold. People submit third-party cost estimations, so from contractors, local contractors, they're almost all local folks. And then we, the state team has cost estimation that is, we review that cost estimation. They can still go with their third-party estimate, or they can go with kind of the consultant that we have that is doing the cost estimation on every project. So at least it is vetted that way. But you know, these, we're talking projects that might be 2-3 years in the future. Of course, costs change, inflation happens, that is factored into some of these estimates. But what happens if the costs do change, the grant is the grant. Like it's not gonna change if the costs go up. So the ability to, just because the project might cost more, it doesn't change the requests. The requests are also different amounts because they are all different businesses, have different abilities to pay, have different operating costs, and have a different, you know, maybe arrangements with their financial institutions. We can't limit or, you know, say a certain amount because every project is so different, and it's on the circumstance of the individual building and the individual business. So they are free to request up to certain amounts. That is, there are limitations in that regard, and there is kind of a default setting of 25%. But at that said, you know, the general sentiment from the committee is that private sponsors should be held to, you know, contribute more, and that is, you know, feedback that we will pass on to every sponsor, and, you know, hopefully they will meet that feedback, and this committee will, and the public will have another opportunity to weigh in on kind of what the final proposals of those sponsors will be. And the last comment that I will address is, you know, that it's very, you know, the whole purpose of this is to improve constantly these projects. That's why we are getting feedback at this stage. It's not set in stone, and even then, what it is proposals that are here to withstand, you know, decisions about funding. They're not final design, and they're not final concepts either. That is for a local process, and that's what that process locally, you will have, you know, additional community feedback on the projects that eventually get funded. This process, you know, gets to a certain point in terms of concepts, and this committee is here, as well as the public, to help improve upon those concepts. So whether a bathroom should be a part of the park, I think the town will probably now include that in the scope, you know, and there's a lot of good feedback, and we want these projects to be as best as they can throughout this process, because some of these will be implemented.